Gandalf gives a bit of a backstory on Smeagol, who becomes Gollum. Gandalf says he ceased to look up at the hilltops, all the leaves, all the trees, all the flowers opening in the air. His head and his eyes were downward. Now Gollum Smeagol starts to lose himself. And instead of facing up with seeing the world of possibility, he starts to look downwards. And when you're looking downwards, this is important to understand from a psychological bent, because posture necessitates feeling. What I mean by that is, if you're constantly looking down with a slouch in your stance, if you're constantly on the downward spiral, you're more likely to feel less empowered, less confident, and have higher levels of stress. In Smeagol's case, he starts to experience a fixedness in his own mindset, a sort of malice that comes up, and a hatred towards anything that would separate him from his own addiction. I often see people in my clinical practice where they say that their drug of choice is their best friend. That's a tricky thing to work with, because it's a matter of saying goodbye to your best friend and separating and going through that grief process. And some people go through it well, other people find it very difficult. Gandalf goes on to say, he wandered in loneliness, weeping a little for the hardness of the world. Alright, so here we've already looked at the external locus of control, blaming others. And so many people blame others for the things that happen to them. And rightly so, in some cases, some bad things happen. But if we take a stance that everything's happening to me and it's everyone else's fault, that puts us in a position where we are incredibly vulnerable and incredibly antagonistic about the idea of making changes, because you want everyone else to change rather than making those changes yourself. And if you're not going to make those changes yourself, you might as well just crawl into your own hole and not come out until you're ready to take that stance, that step forward. It's a hard step to take. Gandalf goes on to say that there was a little corner of his mind that was still his own, and light came through it, as though a chink in the dark, light out of the past. I loved this one, because this light out of the past reminds me of when we're so in the pit of despair, we can always look at something that may have happened that was positive, that was going right in the past, and we can start to see, well, what are we doing now that's relatively different to what was happening back when things were going good? And it's hard because we as people have what's called a negativity bias, as well as a confirmation bias. A negativity bias is our brain is structured in such a way that we want to look at the negative elements because it prepares us to see what is around the corner, and that is as much a stress response as anything else. But also a confirmation bias is we tend to be really open to things that confirm our own beliefs, and this can happen in all sorts of the sphere, where it comes down to political persuasions or psychological thoughts or traumatic concepts that we have, or the types of schemas that we develop, these concepts of the world. If we are only looking at the darkness, then the light is harder to shine through. I remember one of my clients who said, even the smallest flame overpowers the darkest room. With Smeagol, this is what happened. There was a little tiny part of his mind that reminded him of the past, a more beautiful, a more upwards gazing past. But then, as Gandalf says, of course, that would only make the evil part of him angrier in the end. Unless it could be conquered. Unless it could be cured. Gandalf sighed. Alas, there is little hope of that for him. Yet not no hope. We're constantly at battle within ourselves. We have one part of us that believes one thing, another part of us that believes something else, or one part that wants one thing and another part that wants something else. It's really important to understand which part is at play. And for Smeagol, it was the evil that was at play, stronger than the good. But ask yourself, what is it that I'm struggling with? Because it's about balancing these two parts, but acknowledging them first. It's very easy, as Smeagol does, to abandon responsibility and blame other people when evil happens to us. And I use evil very, very purposely there, because evil is something that misses the mark. I think that's a really important thing to consider. Because when we're going through the toughest of the tough, what I notice and what I see in my own clinical practice is meaning making during the darkest times of suffering is the thing that sets apart a person from post-traumatic growth in comparison to post-traumatic stress. If you're able to make meaning out of the suffering that you're going through, you're less likely to experience that despondent overwhelm of the stress that's coming at you. Now, hearing Gollum's story, Frodo gets really annoyed, and what he says is he wishes death upon Gollum. Gandalf is a bit shrewd in his response, and he says this: "Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? And do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the wise cannot see your ends." This is such a pivotal response, because in the end, we are very quick again to try to make sense of what other people are doing rather than what we in our own mind and body and spirit have in control. If we're able to determine what it is that is within our control and what lies within our responsibility, then we're less likely to condemn other people. We immaturely condemn others when we feel hard done by. And that's important because it's a hard kick to the ego to admit that we've done something wrong. But what Gandalf does in this sense is, well, he says, look at yourself, man. Hold up a mirror and know that you're not as wise as you think you are. And even if you were, even the wise don't see all ends. And there's a bit of a hook there, because he still has some hope that the story of Smeagol continues, because all ends implies that there's something else as part of the plan. Often when people are suicidal, I tell them that you must remember that if you kill yourself, you are killing the current version of who you are right now, but you are also killing every single potential person you could be. We can all look back at our own lives and figure out ways that we have been in the pith of despair and then we rose out of there. And if we ended it all back then, we wouldn't be able to be sitting here and live the way that you're living now, which presumably could be a lot better. And if you're in the pit of despair right now, this serves as a reminder that things can get better, and they often do get better.